Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited to have you with us, and hopefully, you have a nice hot cup of coffee or a cold cup of coffee with you and ready to learn what I hope will be a lot of great information. Before we get started, I do want to take care of a couple of housekeeping items. First, it's really important to us that you have an opportunity to ask questions. So make sure to use the question function on your computer to be able to do that. And I should also note that we have our fabulous intern, Elise Hopes, with us today to help moderate the Q&A portion, which is dispersed throughout the webinar as well. And so let me also introduce myself as well. I'm Lana Rucks, Principal Consultant of the Rucks Group. And the Rucks Group is a research and evaluation firm that gathers, analyzes, and interprets data to enable our clients to measure the impact of their work. We were formed in 2008, and over the past several years, we've had the privilege with working with a number of clients, primarily in higher education, and grants funded by federal agencies such as the National Science Foundation, Department of Education, and Department of Labor, as well as projects funded by foundations such as the Gates Foundation and the Kresge Foundation. So if you're on this call, you may have some familiarity with the concept of evaluation, but even still, I think there's a lot of utility and benefit of providing a definition, because there's a lot of different ways that people think of what evaluation is. So the definition that I gravitate to is this one, and that is evaluation is the use of social science methods to systematically investigate the effectiveness of social intervention programs. Now, because evaluation comes out of a research tradition, you can kind of understand why there's a lot of different terms, concepts, words that are kind of difficult in terms of understanding what they mean, let alone really understanding where they actually apply and where they are applicable. And so that makes it very challenging when trying to write an evaluation plan for grant proposals, particularly when evaluation has kind of increased in its importance within the grant funding space. So that's why there are a couple of purposes throughout this webinar series that I want to accomplish. First, I want to be able to organize evaluation terms around the framework, help you to understand conceptually where each term falls, and then using that to be able to provide a formula for actually writing evaluation plans. Taking that together, hopefully the other piece that we'll be able to do is just reduce some of the evaluation angst. So instead of seeing some evaluation as a nuisance and something that you have to do that's actually in the way of the project, being able to reduce that evaluation angst so you can see the value of evaluation and how it actually helps you to achieve your goals. And then finally, of course, like I mentioned, we want to make sure that we're able to answer your questions. So let me start by talking about the organizing framework and the organizing framework for an evaluation plan. And this is how I think about these elements of evaluation. So the first two pieces, I think of those as the foundation. And that's where we're talking about the theory of change and the evaluation questions. And that's really the purpose of today's webinar. The next two I think of as the methods. That's the evaluation design, data gathering, and analysis. And that's going to be what we will review in 2 weeks. And the final piece will be the finale, the use of evaluation findings, and the operational approach. So one of the things that you may be thinking, again, if you've been in this space with evaluations, that, wait a minute, Lana, I like the concept of things just kind of falling within 6 elements, but is that really true? Because it feels like there's this real kind of variation if I'm working with a small grant versus a large grant, and it gets really confusing in regards to what I should put in and what I shouldn't put in. And that's a completely legitimate point. So the way that I want you to think about this is think about this like an accordion. And think about that if you're doing or working with a small grant, a small scale, you push in the elements, and I'll talk about how to do that so that for a small scale, for each of those 6 different components, you may just include a sentence. So the resulting evaluation plan may just be a paragraph. Or for a large scale, you may kind of pull out and you'll have more detail in certain elements. So you're talking about it with several sentences or a paragraph, and you're adding much more detail. So fundamentally, for the evaluation plan, we're still just talking about 6 elements, but what's going to vary will be the amount of detail. And I did want to provide at least way I think about assessing scale, so at least you can understand what I mean when I say small or moderate or large scale, because scale is really relative. It kind of depends on what projects that you're used to working with or used to working on. So when I say small, what I'm saying is that the funding amount is about $130,000 per year. And that in that evaluation plan, typically there are limited words for the evaluation. So there's not a lot of space for that. When you start getting to moderate, it's somewhere between 150 to a million in terms of funding per year. And there may be more explicit requirements for the external evaluator or around the evaluation. And you're given more space to actually describe what you're going to do with the evaluation. And then for a large scale, we're talking about a funding amount of maybe $1 million or more and more kind of detailed. Again, you may have a different definition of small, moderate, and large, but at least you'll get a sense of what I'm talking about when I'm referring to scale.